Philadelphia. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on a very special night. So we are doing this for a number of reasons. I was inspired by the fireside chat that Jeff Kramer from ComedySportz San Jose did a few weeks ago with the founder of ComedySportz, Mr. Dick Chudnow. And I thought it was such a fascinating, great, wonderful conversation to kind of just follow the process of ComedySportz as an institution. I thought it would be really great to share with the fans, the players, and the students of ComedySportz Philadelphia the story of how our four founders came together and how they started ComedySportz. So that's what tonight's going to be. Tonight's going to be a kind of somewhat guided, but certainly a free-form conversation about the history of ComedySportz in Philadelphia. So let's see. I'm going to ask my guests to join us now. So I'm going to do that by going like this. So there we go. Those are our guests this evening. If you could please turn on your, unmute your mics. Joining me is Kevin Dougherty, Jim Carpenter, who found his unmute button, and Bobbi Block, the three of the four original founders of ComedySportz in Philadelphia. Now, I think it's certainly kind of worth discussing in the very beginning here. The title of the show is Four Friends from Penn, but there's only three on screen. I did not go to Penn, and I'm not friendly. But a little bit. The fourth person, the fourth founder of ComedySportz was, of course, Mike Young, who unfortunately passed away in 2006. But Mike's presence is felt in everything that we do, and he will certainly be part of our conversation this evening. So I would like to start by asking, actually, before I do, just one other piece of business is y'all can see the Q&A option on your screen, those of you who are watching. So please feel free over the course of tonight's conversation to put any questions in there, and we'll certainly see what we can do about answering those questions over the course of the conversation. You also all have the ability to comment in the chat as well. We welcome it, so please feel free to do so. So I kind of would love to start by just I'm going to start with you, Bob, and just kind of talk about how you met these three individuals.
Oh, how we met?
Yes.
Way back. Well, Kevin Dougherty was roommates with my camp friend, Dave Polsky. And freshman year, I went to visit Dave Polsky in his dorm at Penn, because I didn't really know many other people at Penn. So I thought I'd visit him, and he introduced me to his buddy from Pittsburgh.
Yep.
He and Polsky grew up together in Pittsburgh. He introduced me to Kevin.
That was like the first night. That was like the very first day we got to school, I think.
Yeah, it was, I didn't know anybody. I was like, I need friends.
This is the first day of freshman year at Penn?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
What?
That's amazing.
Yes.
And how did Jim come into the picture?
There was a rodeo, and no, there's no rodeo.
Ask a wig.
Go ahead, Kevin.
No, you're on screen.
Oh, I am? Okay, I'm sorry. So basically, Kevin was in Mask and Wig. We auditioned for it together.
So Mask and Wig is a all-male comedy group at Penn.
Yeah. So it's very renowned and everything. And we both auditioned, and Kevin's a better dancer in heels, so therefore he got accepted. I didn't get accepted, but that's how we met and, started writing.
Right. Yeah, you were a writer. I mean, you were a writer for 4
So we
years.
would write the sketches and stuff like that. That's how we got to know each other. And I was one dorm over, so we got to know each other that way.
Right.
And then,
and Mike was also in Mask and Wig, is correct?
Right, but he was younger. Jimmy, when I was trying to remember back, when we were seniors, Mike was a freshman. Is that right, Bob?
Yes.
Right. So I think I had one year performing Mask and Wig with Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I was leaving, he was coming. What?
and then
you did Without a Net. I
Yeah.
forgot, you and Mike did Without a Net together, which was the improv group at Penn.
Yeah. So what happened is
Polsky was in.
Yeah. So Polsky.
Full circle.
Yeah. Polsky, did he write for South Park? But anyways. Oh wait, screen sharing. But there you go. That's the Mask and Wig Clubhouse. Yeah. And I think, Kevin, what are the mugs?
The mugs, like when you become a senior or you graduate, you get a mug up on the wall. Mine is like back in the corner somewhere.
But it's an amazing clubhouse. It's amazing. But Mike got into Without a Net Mask and Wig within a year or two. He was running Mask and Wig,
right?
And then he joined Without a Net because he wanted to do more freestyle stuff that wasn't scripted. And within about 6 months, he was the artistic director of Without a Net. And then I stayed in Without a Net because I went to law school at Penn. So I just hung on as much as I could.
And then I was a Mask and Wig groupie. So I would hang out.
You were a theater person.
I was a theater person. Yeah, I did a ton of theater at Penn. But I also just loved Mask and Wig, and I would hang out and I would just, fall in love with all of the guys, and most of them were gay that I fell in love with.
You have that effect, but
yeah. And then after we all graduated, I moved home to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and lived with my parents, and I hated living there so much that I would drive back across the bridge to visit my friend Glenn Berger. And Glenn Berger wrote the Spider-Man musical,
right,
and many great plays. Anyway, Mike was roommates with Glenn Berger.
Oh God, that's right.
And I would go and I'd be like, again, I need friends. I don't want to be in Cherry Hill. So I'd go back to Penn and I'd try to hang out with Glenn, but Glenn would be out and Mike would be there. So I started hanging out with Mike more. Mike kept answering the door and we kept hanging out more. So that's how Mike and I started dating.
I kind of figured that, I always felt that there was a little bit of Mike in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bob, at this point, had you done any improv at Penn?
No, I didn't do improv at Penn. I did all theater. I took theater classes. I took tons of acting classes. I was in something called Penn Players. I was in something called Quadramics. Yeah, that's where I was doing musicals and doing straight plays. I was not doing improv. Yeah, and then I would come back, same thing after I graduated, loved Without a Net, the improv company, would be a groupie of Without a Net, would just go to the shows and watch. Yeah, that's it. So no improv training in college.
So it's awesome, just as a kind of an interesting side note, is Without a Net is still in existence at Penn.
Oh, cool.
Right? Not without a net, without a net.
Really quick, Bobby, did you see that's Andrew Martin, who is another Wig? If it's the same one, it's
oh yes,
from Wig.
Yes.
Well, hi, Andrew.
So they are still in existence. In fact, last year they were the first winners of our comedy collegiate challenge.
Right.
They won the first year. They were the champions that year.
Well, it's always fun. If we do a remote or road show at Penn for Parents Weekend, and I've been out of the group Without a Net for 20 or 25 years, and they'd still be performing at the same time. So it was always exciting to go up and tell them, that if they kept at it, they could be performing before their parents in 20 years. We killed a lot of dreams, made a lot more doctors, hopefully.
I would like to reveal something before we move on in chronology, which is, I believe it must have been freshman year at Penn, going back to that. Kevin Dougherty and I went on one date.
Yes, we did.
Man.
How about that? Jim, did you go on a date with Kevin?
Oh, we were pretty steady. We went steady for a period.
Okay.
I wore his jacket.
All right, let's move forward. So, Bobby, you were not doing any improv until 1990. Now, in 1990, ComedySportz had already been going in Milwaukee, and I believe it was also in a number of other cities as well. And one place it was in Washington, D.C. And it was run by a gentleman named Pat Walsh, who either decided on his own or in strategizing with Dick Chudnow, he decided that he wanted to open up a ComedySportz office match show in Philadelphia. So this was, I think, August in 1990. Yes, August of 1990. You can see this picture. This picture is crazy. I was looking at this. First of all,
Oh my gosh.
they've never been able to spell our name correctly. There is no space between comedy and sports. So they've been getting it wrong for over 30 years. But I love the names. It was the Philadelphia Deficits versus the Paoli Locals.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Which is, Paoli Locals is a pretty good name. Gotta say, it's a pretty good name. Also, I don't know anyone in that picture. I can't say who anyone is. So tell me about how did you get connected with Pat? Because you're some of the first three members of that group.
Yeah, so it started off with me and Mike. We saw an ad in the back of the city paper. It was that big.
Dude.
Auditions for an improv company, and he and I both decided to audition for it. And we both got in, which was great. So we started doing ComedySportz, and they started training us to do all the shows. And I think we were performing or starting to perform a little bit, and then they were offering classes. And that's when I think we told you guys, Kevin and Jim, to come and take the class.
Well, it's weird the things that you remember. I ran into Mike. I still remember exactly where I was because I had moved down to Baltimore. I was living in Baltimore and then in Connecticut for a while. And I had just moved back to Philly, was living in West Philly and working at Fifth and Market. And I ran into him in front of Independence Hall one day after work. And I hadn't seen him in years. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And he said, Bobby and I are doing this thing called ComedySportz. We have a show on Friday. Come see it. I think you'll really like it. And I went to see the show, first of all, and that's how I started to get involved. I think I took classes and then auditioned.
So now, Kev, when you saw it, did you get at Doc Watson's?
Yeah, it was at Doc Watson's. Upstairs. Yeah. Is that what you're asking? Where was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Doc Watson's. Jim,
and that room, Bob, I'm sorry, if I'm remembering right, that room at Doc Watson's, it was just like a room.
Yeah, it
wasn't like a theater space in any way.
Third floor. That place is Strange Loves now. I think that's what it's.
No idea.
Yeah, third floor. No, I think there might have been a little stage to stand on. But yeah, it was just a bar.
It was like in somebody's living room. It was like.
And there was like 3 people came to the show.
Yeah.
So.
But Jim, were you in the same, did you take the same class as Kevin?
My recollection is that Mike vouched for me so I could sort of get into the group. I mean, I think I did the audition and I didn't get in. And then he sort of helped me get in that way. Because I don't remember taking the classes.
And then I'm sorry, what was that, Bob?
No, I was just going to go on to say the genius of the management of our 5-show-a-week debut.
You got to explain that. So we were scheduled. Oh, go ahead, Bobby.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. So the guy was running us from DC. He sent a guy up. His name was Scott Grossman. And Scott managed us, but between the two of them, they made a decision that we could open a show that no one knew anything about, 5 performances a week, and they thought that we could sustain 5 performances a week. And we absolutely did not.
Right.
We went down one show every week that we were there. So it went from 5 to 4 to 2 to 1 to Doc Watson's kicking us out basically because it wasn't. You know.
And Bobbi,
money on food and drink, and they were making 0 money and didn't understand us, and yeah, it was terrible.
Right. But
So what were the first matches like?
Wait, Kevin's been trying to say something. Kevin.
Well, no, I just have a question. I think you mentioned it. I was trying to kind of read the chat while you were talking about it. So Pat Walsh was the guy from DC, but he sent that other guy. Who was the other guy who actually ran Philly for a while? Pat Walsh was like,
Right.
I remember. What was it?
Scott Gross.
Right. So Pat seemed like he kind of knew what he was doing. He kind of reminded me of Norm Macdonald. Like he was really sarcastic and smoked a lot.
Yeah.
And I think if he had run it,
Yeah.
I think it would have worked. But then he stayed in DC and sent this guy Scott, who he moved here, I think, from DC to do it. Like for his job, like this was going to be his job, like his full-time job.
What we thought was Pat put out to any member of his company in DC. I don't know if this is the truth. This was what we surmised. Pat said to any member of his company, I need somebody to move to Philadelphia who have a life and wouldn't mind moving to Philadelphia and running Comedy Sports. Doesn't matter if you have any business experience or any experience whatsoever.
You know, and that's going to screen out the bad possibilities, you know, if you have those elements. I have no friends. I got to get out of my apartment. You know, it's perfect for a business.
I want to go back to my question before that is like, just to give, because a lot of people who are watching this, they know what Comedy Sportz is. They play it, they take our classes. So I think it would be really interesting, you know, to hear what those first kind of those first matches were like in the very beginning. Were they the same? Did they change? How were the games? What was that like?
I seem to remember, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we played a lot more gimmick games than scene-based games. That might just be my recollection.
I think at the beginning we did because we had to get up and running so fast, they couldn't teach us good scene work skills.
Right.
Only teach us how to do gimmicks. So yeah, you're right, we did. And I'll never forget, they showed us a video of another Comedy Sportz match so that we would know what the hell we were doing. We had no idea what we had auditioned at all. And they showed us players playing 185, which for those who know in the audience is a pun making game. You had to make up puns like that. And as soon as I saw 185, I was like, there's no way I can do that. Are you kidding? And we all got very intimidated watching the video of other Comedy Sportz teams. But then they threw us on stage and we had to do it. Like we had to make it work. So we did.
Yeah, and it's hard to, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, me and Mike refed all the shows. Well, after Scott. That's right. It was later. Bad chronology. It was after we had gotten up and running. Me and Mike refed every single show over and over and over again. So we just, reffing was in our brains. Been more than playing.
And that was a big deal. I remember when I became like the first time I reffed, like you had to go through training to become a ref, and you still do, obviously. And I remember but I had done a number of shows by then, and I was scared out of my wits to ref my first show.
Yeah, and you had to do it, do the repertoire in front of Mike. And I remember when Mike took a personality test, it came back as field general. So he was the sweetest guy in the world, but he could be very intimidating. And you'd get through the spiel and think you did well, and he would point out the fact that you basically ran back and forth across the stage the whole time. So, but yeah, I did reffing for a short period of time. But my motive was to make fun of the players, which is really not the point of a ref. So.
That's more of the job of an owner.
Yeah, I guess the prerogative.
think, Don, to answer your question, they did a really great job training us in the philosophy of comedy sports.
Yeah.
We play to win. We don't care if we lose. That was drilled into us from the beginning. Sacrifice yourself, sacrifice your team for the good of the show. Sacrifice yourself for the good of the team. So they really were teaching us all those good skills. And you're probably right, Kevin. I think it was a lot of gimmicky games and not, nobody was studying improv back then. Like now, anybody can take an improv class anywhere. That did not exist. In fact, the flyers that we had for those first shows was an icon of a guy at a stand-up mic with one of those big X's through it, like a no smoking sign X, as if to tell the audience, this is not stand-up. You don't understand what this is. We're making this up. This is not scripted. This is not stand-up. No one knew what improv was.
No, and they would always ask about it, and they didn't understand that it wasn't scripted, which I always thought was funny, that they thought it was great because they thought it was scripted. And I'm like, that's some of the worst scripted work you can see. But it was a difficult thing to get them to understand, because then you'd follow up with, and we rehearse, and people would be like, well, what do you rehearse? And we're like, well, we have this big book, the big book of improv suggestions, and we're working our way through it, and we're at P at this point. We explain that. Right. And and I remember starting it in the 80s, even before ComedySportz, it was just unheard of. People didn't know what it was, so it was an educating process.
Right. I remember. Do you remember who was the guy? I want to say that he was British, but he might not have been. He was an older gentleman. We paid and we did a workshop with him. He was is it something Johnson?
Oh, Keith Johnson.
Keith, right? I remember that being a big deal because. One, he was like a premier improv guru, but one of the only ones. Bobby, going back to you couldn't just go online and take an improv, find 10 different improv classes right in your city. I remember we either hired him and brought him down and put him up for 3 days or a day, or it was big and expensive to do back then.
Yeah,
he written one of the seminal work.
What's that, Jim?
Yeah.
He wrote one of the major works on it, along with Viola Spolin.
Right.
It was the book that Alana Long and Dave Polsky used to start our group, Without a Net. But that's a major reference.
Book is called Impro.
Answer a question in the chat. I said Kevin took classes in improv. He took the ComedySportz classes.
Right.
The business model of ComedySportz was to move to Philadelphia, do 5 shows, and offer classes and make lots of money. But Kevin did take one of the ComedySportz classes.
Right.
And he failed.
So I want to move the story along a little bit. So obviously, Pat sent this guy Scott up here to run this company, and it did not go well, and he ended up leaving. And so how did you four end up taking it over?
Well, it was not before we moved. We moved from Doc Watson's to a place called the Coliseum in New Jersey, where the Flyers practice. Is that right, guys?
Yeah,
I think so.
Our hockey team. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And we performed in this crazy place in New Jersey for a while, and then it folded. So Doc Watson's kicked us out. We went to New Jersey, then it folded. So then how did we start it up again? Well, it folded and we were bummed. I mean, we're all in our 20s, that was so much fun.
Yeah.
Do that more and more and more. How can we do it?
And the Scott Walsh basically said to the 4 of us, said to Mike, it's not brain surgery, to run an improv group. So he basically signed it over to us, and we took over the franchise for Philadelphia.
Right. I think we were down for maybe 6 months before we made that decision.
Yeah.
Like that.
And we wrote a partnership agreement on a cocktail napkin and had it notarized, and that's about how formal it was.
And where's that napkin right now?
No one knows.
I thought you had it, Jim.
I do. I was going through my basement. I found a lot of our old papers, which is really upsetting because there's some liability issues we need to talk about.
So yeah, we said, hey, we're all buds. We're savvy enough to maybe start this thing up.
Or at least, Bob, at least not to run it into the ground. Right? Hang on.
Mike.
I have another podcast I need to join. I'll be right back.
So important.
We're gonna leave that up on the screen so everyone can see that Kevin has stepped away. Go ahead, Bob.
Mike ran Without a Net as the artistic director of Without a Net. So we figured, okay, Mike can be the artistic director of this new comedy sports team. And, Jim was a lawyer, so he knew all the stuff we had to do, like notarizing napkins. I had done PR and marketing at Villanova University when I was getting my graduate degree. And Kevin studied finance at Wharton, so he could money. So we were like, wow, between the four of us, we can cover a lot of stuff. We can do this. I feel like we made the decision sitting in Rittenhouse Square on the grass. Am I totally wrong about that?
That might be right, yeah.
Yeah, it probably was.
And I have to mention one more guy. There was this guy named Kent Davis.
Yes!
And he was sort of in on it too, but I don't even know how he left or how he's not in on it anymore. But he's part of the story.
Yes.
But
He was like the first, he was like the fifth Beatle.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he moved to LA or something like that. He was a working actor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't remember the story behind him leaving. Just one day he wasn't there.
Right.
Yeah, like Jimmy Hoffa.
So we decided to have auditions, and we had auditions, and we wanted to, this is the story I remember, we wanted to have them at Plays and Players. No. Shit. Ooh.
Yeah.
The Ethical Society? One of those places near.
Plays and Players.
Okay, Plays and Players. And we got locked out. And we had all of these auditioners coming. So we ended up having auditions in somebody's living room. Whose living room did we have them in? Do you guys remember this story? Kevin, you're on mute.
Was that the auditions? We had at least one set of auditions at yours and Mike's apartment.
Our living room? Okay.
Yeah.
What?
Remember whose living room it was.
I think it was because then I remember making the decision. We had all the Polaroids. You had a room that wasn't part of your apartment that you had access to.
Yes.
And that's where, like, I don't even remember, like, we sat down and we're like looking at all the Polaroids and trying to figure out who was in.
Maybe we should explain what Polaroid.
I think they're back. I think Polaroids are back.
Anyway.
But what was...
Let's name, we had Jen Childs, who is now head of 1812 Productions, and Scott, no, I don't think Scott was in that.
Scott was a later year.
Mary Carpenter, who was Mary Jackman back then, but guess what happened?
She married me. So I finally got something out of this group, so I'm very lucky.
And Megan Belwar, and Nicole Borelli, and Kelly Jennings, and lots of other people.
And one of the interesting aspects was we had, I think we had more women than men in the actual group, which is, if in the world of comedy, whether it's stand-up or improv, it's largely a male sort of world. So this has been, a major influence on the work we've done, is that if you're a guy, you can't just push through women or deny their offers, that sort of thing. So it's been a real accomplishment to have some equality in that respect.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think is very strong about our company is the quality of our performers. That they are, and I would say that the women in our company are probably some of the strongest performers in our company.
Sure.
They're just amazing all around. I want to transition over to, because we at this point you were trying to figure out where you guys were going to perform. You performed at the Brick, but you also performed at Pizzeria Uno on Head House Square, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Which one was first?
Uno's.
I think Uno's, yeah.
We did a bunch of shows.
I'm sorry. There was a short stint, I believe, at the Brick, which wasn't the Brick. It was called it was first called Tri-Arts Theater, and then it was called the Climax Theater.
Yeah.
And Jim, didn't it last at the Climax Theater?
Well, you got a certain clientele that would come to the Climax Theater. But I remember with Uno's, and really you can't pick a better place than a deep dish serving Chicago-based franchise to do improv in. We were there for a few weeks until Kevin broke one of their neon Budweiser.
You know what?
That they fired us right there.
That is not what broke the camel's back. No, maybe it was what broke the camel's.
Kevin broke it, and the next day we were out.
Yep. Then we had to go back to the Climax, which was really anticlimactic at that point.
What was it like to have to pick up and move every few months? You're basically picking up your show. Like, how do you communicate that to your audience? Especially, this is long before social media. You know, how was that?
We would have someone stand at the old place and hand out flyers directing them to the new place, and then start the show just a little bit late. But yeah, I mean, that's what we did. You didn't have internet, you didn't have email. We had a huge mailing list that we built up over the years.
Yes.
We would send postcards, which was a huge undertaking to stamp them and everything else.
We weren't performing, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, we weren't performing weekly then. So it's not like we had people coming every week trying to find us, right?
How often were you performing?
Well, in the beginning, we just did stints.
Yeah.
And then I think at Uno's, it started to be more regular.
And how many would you get to those stints? Would you get like 10, 15 people, or would you get 40, 50 people?
Yeah. I don't think we got 40 or 50 people. I think it was just a handful.
Yeah. It wasn't until we moved to the Bourse that we started really.
Right.
Right. So let's talk about that.
Oh my God.
That is the Bourse. So for those who don't know, at the Bourse, downstairs of the Bourse, there was a very big performance space that was being run by Joe Caroli, patron saint of small theaters in Philadelphia.
I'm selling bacon.
Yeah, there's Jim selling bacon. You know, what's interesting is Andrew said the first time he saw you all perform was at the Bourse. That was also the first time that I saw you all perform. I was an apprentice at the Arden Theater. It was 1994 or 95, and they took us to see a show, you know, just to kind of give us something fun to do. And we went to the Bourse. We stood in line, and we went downstairs, and we saw this amazing comedy show. And I was like, wow, that is awesome. That was so much fun. And I think the first time I'd actually heard of it was the year before that. I was an understudy in an Arden show called Man and Superman. And I was understudy with a young actor named Trevor Davis. And Trevor told me that he had just gone to audition for this new show called ComedySportz. It's improv. It's like, whose line is it anyway? And I think he said he had gotten in. There he is. There's Trevor right there.
In the blue.
In blue with Kevin in red behind him. Yeah, so that was how I first heard about it. So what was it like performing at the Bourse? Because it really took off there.
I mean, it was great. We had people would get there an hour and a half ahead of time, and then they would line and go all the way up the stairs and around the building. So we realized, you know, we could make, the fire code was probably 66 or so, but we would have at least 100 in there. And that's with tables, so they could have service. There was no alcohol, but they served toast, which is, we can explain later. But the line, we realized that the line was just out of control. So we would get there early and stamp people's hands, so they had a stamp that would entitle them to buy a ticket. So, and you had to turn away people every night. So it was really phenomenal that people were this into it. I mean, it was really exciting.
And
you were performing every week at this time, right? You were performing every Saturday.
Yes.
And let's be clear, you're performing at like 10:30, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were other shows. So it was called the Actors Center at the Bourse. And the Actors Center was a school first, I think. And then they opened this space and they would put on shows. They transformed this lower level of the Bourse to a theater. So we had to wait until those shows went down to do our show. And we would get in, we'd have to set up really, really fast. And our show started at 10:30. That's the only way we could get a slot. And I do want to say about the lining up around the block, nothing was happening in Old City at that time. There was no Old City. There was no like, Second Street full of bars and restaurants and Market Street full of bars and restaurant. It was deserted.
Yeah.
People go there. It was a destination to go there and go into this basement. It was like people knew, there's Joe Caroli.
Caroli.
It was like people knew a secret, right? I'm going to go to this place. It's in the Bourse. It's at 10:30. It was really cool to go. And nothing else was going on around there. The reason why we had that picture of Joe Caroli up there is because Joe Caroli is the one who pretty much with his hands transformed the basement of the Bourse into a theater space, and he ran it and he took really good care of it.
He's a well-known curmudgeon. So basically, he had seen our show the first time we did it, and then came back and said, "You didn't suck that much." I think that was the phrase. Yeah. And with that endorsement, he's kept us there for I think a couple of years.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah.
So then, what happened? Did the Bourse, did they lose their license, or how did you end up leaving?
Their rent was too high. They had to close the Actors Center at the Bourse.
You remember how much it was?
Less than we're paying now.
I don't remember. Do you remember?
No, I have no idea.
Although, you know what? I don't remember.
Ours. Okay.
What?
Man. Yeah.
Well, I don't remember, but I'm sure I still have canceled checks in my basement.
Yeah, you can get rid of those now. You don't need to keep those. The government.
We might need them, Don. You're going to come back to me, Don, one of these days.
You better hope not. Cartel money you were laundering throughout Comedy Sports.
Indeed.
So
Yeah.
how big was the company at this point? Because when you started, you had your 5 people, and then you would basically have auditions every year, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, we're just looking at my timeline here. By the time you get to the Bourse. Oh, actually, did you go to Society Hill Playhouse first?
No, we were in negotiations with Society Hill Playhouse, and then that fell through.
Gotcha. All right, so it was 1993 then that you ended up going in. And so by 1993, you had about 20 people in the company. Do you remember that?
Yes, that's the number I was going to say.
Yeah.
But wait, did we go from the Bourse back to the Brick for a while and then to our current space?
Oh yeah, you were at the Brick for a while. So yeah, you eventually.
Yeah, a long time.
Brick.
Yeah.
This is the Brick.
I love space.
The Brick had the most dangerous set of stairs you could possibly imagine. And people would line up it, and we were just waiting for somebody to fall and knock out 20 other people.
So the same thing would happen at the Brick that happened at the Bourse, but there was no other, as Jim was saying, there was no other way to get out of the Brick except that stairwell. So there would be shows, regular plays happening earlier in the evening, and all of the people would let out of that show and have to go down those stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody lining up for ComedySportz would have to lean against the wall to let them go down and move their way up. It was insane. Like, it was like, okay, go time. Like, boom, get them out, get them in. It was like huge adrenaline rush to do the changeover of the two shows.
Right. And so that's the front. And just a bit of trivia and history. That's where "Yay Us, Oh Shit" comes from.
Yeah, you want to explain that?
Yeah. So the
backstage.
Yeah.
Go for it.
No, go, Bob.
Kevin, do it.
So we would our rehearsal space, not rehearsal space, our dressing room in the behind the stage was this tiny room, and the ceiling was really low. And I think Mike brought us all together once, and like everybody bring it in, You know, like a sports thing, we all went, yay, us. But the ceiling was so low that people would smack their hands on the ceiling, and then somebody said, oh, shit, and then that became the thing.
Hey, every
Scott Greer did it, somebody says?
Yeah, Scott Greer.
a light bulb. Broke a light bulb that way.
He did?
Somebody, you know, what else happened there was Tom McManus and
shorts.
didn't they get engaged there? There
Yeah.
was an engagement,
Micheline.
which was fun. Micheline and Tom, and it was a surprise to Micheline to have it happen on stage, which is probably the worst way to possibly do it. But she said yes. And the best part was watching one of the guys carry another guy out as if they had gotten married as well, which of course would be fine. But it was very hilarious to see the whole thing.
So somebody's asking Jim, how did Jim and Mary meet?
Kev, I'll ask the questions.
Oh.
Jim, someone in the chat is asking how you and Mary met.
We met at her audition when I let her in the group. No, no, we started dating about 6 months after she was in the group.
And it was a secret for a while, wasn't it?
Yeah, until we went to Reading Terminal and Bobby saw us, and then it was all over the place.
I don't remember that.
But no, about six months in, so I was very fortunate. So we had a very good class, and she was the best.
Kevin Dougherty.
Yeah.
Your lovely wife.
I was her improv teacher. In fact, hang on. I have to go to my other podcast. Hold on. Hey, hon. That picture from Comedy Sports, can you bring that up?
Okay.
God.
So around this time, you were also celebrating your 100th show. Was that at the Bourse or was that at the Brick?
I think it was at the Bourse.
Okay.
Because I saw an anniversary sign in one of the pictures.
Oh, right. That was that picture that Dave put up. Dave Attica helping us behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen, putting up pictures. Give a shout out to Dave in the chat. So, Bob, what were you going to say?
No, I didn't remember, but yes.
Okay. So at this point in the run of the show, had it changed at all from your perspective, looking at it where you started with Pat and Scott and Doc Watson's, and now you're doing it, weekly, successfully? How had the show changed? How did the gameplay change? Did any of that, adjust?
I'm sorry, I'm distracted by my youth.
No, I would say the rush and the adrenaline was a lot more when you have 100 people in a very confined space.
Yeah.
So it was really just exciting. You get done the show, then you just want to talk about the show, and you take notes, and it was just the adrenaline feeding off having an actual audience. We didn't have that at Uno's or at Doc Watson's, but having an actual audience that was giving you feedback was phenomenal.
And I think it's also, look at that great picture.
Yeah, we won Best of Philly that year.
Best of Philly for what? What was it?
Actors Center won Best of Philly.
Oh, well, like Mike says, see?
Look at our uniforms. How has the show changed? The uniforms have changed. That's the biggest change.
Oh, I think we actually have an example of that. So, Dave, you want to put up the uniform picture? So here's a great way that
Ooh.
Oh.
Look at that.
In 92, it was sleepwear, as we wore sweatpants, which is really hot in the summer.
And then we had to wear the double shirt thing.
With the penny, yeah.
And when I joined, it was the baseball jersey.
Who
Who made the decisions early on? Was that a group decision, or since Mike was artistic director, did he make the decision?
In terms of uniforms?
Yes.
Was that a national thing? Didn't all the uniforms look alike?
No.
Didn't we buy them? No? All right, I'm misremembering that.
I think it was a complaint, probably from the women, that we didn't like wearing 2 layers. We didn't like wearing the t-shirt and the penny over it, so we wanted to wear one shirt, and Mike heard us and changed the uniform. That's what I remember.
I mean the original uniforms, the ones that we all, like with those crazy sweatpants that nobody liked.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was a great remote we did when we were trying to generate publicity, the old Borders bookstore had a stairwell that went up to the second floor, and we had to perform at the top of the stairwell, which was also exciting.
Oh, I also wanted to tell one more story. What Jim was saying about so many people, and it was so nice to perform in front of those huge crowds. That's what changed. We used to seat people at tables. I think Jim mentioned that as well at the Bourse. And we didn't have a business phone number. We had Mike and Bobby's phone number. So they would call Mike and Bobby's house and leave a message on our answering machine. Right. Is that the Bourse?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So they would leave a message and they'd say how many people were in their party. And we had a map, of all the tables on our kitchen table. And we would take one of those, the pencils and draw in.
One of those pencils?
Old timey.
One of those, whatever. And we would write them in and change them. And then people would call us back, like, no, I don't have 5 people, I have 4 people. And then we change that. And then they get to the door and we would literally seat them like we had to be a maitre d' on top of seating people at these tables.
Didn't we make table tents of like where people would sit and the number in their party? Yeah.
We did so much. And there was so much adrenaline behind it. So much that's it. It was youth. It was youth and energy. And everything was Comedy Sports. Everything was.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great. We had a great, great time.
That's amazing. And again, I kind of want to underline, because I think this is really important just for the perspective, is that this is before social media. This is before the internet, right? Like, that stuff didn't exist yet. So you had to buy ads in weeklies. You had to put out flyers, and it was word of mouth.
Right.
And that was how you got the word out about your show. And the fact that you could do that, isn't this great? This old flyer.
That's how we would let people know we were moving, because we didn't have the internet.
Right.
We would just hand out flyers. But it was really word of mouth, and it was a sort of status thing. A friend of mine would bring just dozens of people, and then more people and more people. It was just fantastic.
I think that speaks really high to the quality of the show, is that it was such a great show that word spread.
Yeah.
Right. And I just think that's amazing. And I think that is really awesome to kind of see that back in 1993, 94, and 95, there was this grassroots effort to create this show that took off, and was incredibly successful after kind of a really rocky start. And again, as you said, there was no improv in Philadelphia at that time. I think there was maybe a sketch group or two, and you had Sheer Madness, which was a comedy theatrical show, but there was no improv there. And you brought this, you all kind of took this idea, this concept that was developed by Dick Chudnow, and you put it into the theater scene. You put it into the entertainment landscape of Philadelphia. You totally disrupted what people thought was, a theatrical presentation.
Well, yeah. But I think it was just, like Bobby said, it was youth. And it was just, we loved it so much. We had so much fun. And the audiences, when we would perform, had so much fun that it was just, to say that it was a labor of love seems almost like an understatement.
So that's really because you're talking about how this thing was a labor of love and how it was comedy sports. It just was your morning, your noon, and your night. But, at some point, you have to make that decision of, well, is it really going to be? Or at some point there's, like you said, youth eventually passes and you get married, you have kids, you have responsibilities, you have mortgage payments, or you've done 500 shows as a referee. At some point there is a shift. And I want, before we talk about moving to the playground, I kind of want to get a sense from you about when that shift happened for you.
I think it was last week with Kevin. I just can't do it anymore.
Well, I mean, no, for me, it really was when Matthew was born, my son.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I really started to, my priorities shifted, right? And I got, I don't know if you can see this, but that Bobbi was asking me where I met my wife, and that's her right there. I was her, and that's me down there. I was their improv teacher. And, you know, even after we got married, ComedySportz was still, I mean, and she knew. It was like being a golf widow, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or when she like knew that this was a huge part of my life. And she saw that, you know, even before we were dating and all that. So she knew. And then even after we got married, you know, it was still big. And, you know, we bought, like you said, we bought a house and all that happened. But I think for me, when my son was born, that's when things really began to shift. Okay. So that was.
And leadership before Matthew was born, right?
Say that again.
Yeah, it's getting a little, I don't know what happened. So Kevin, we had already given leadership away before Matthew was born.
Yeah, that's true. That was in, what year did we turn the board over?
2003?
Yeah, so that
was 2000, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's in the history notes. So basically
2006.
Wait, so let me explain.
Wait.
Oh, what do you mean wait?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the way we would promote the show is we had this cow outfit, and we'd go out into Rittenhouse Square with those strategically placed udders and hand out flyers to people. And what's ironic is I'm a lawyer, and this was in the sex crimes unit that I worked in. So we got a lot of feedback, but it's great.
So somebody on the chat asked, tell us about the cow on your uniform. So
it was the New Jersey Cows. It wasn't the Turnpikes. It was the New Jersey Cows, which was the funniest thing we could think of at that time, I think, right?
I think so. Somebody else.
There's the cow on the.
And Mike did all the graphics for everything.
Yeah.
So I think even the national Chucky symbol in the back on the banner, he devised that as well.
Howie symbol.
Howie. All right.
Don, are all four of us being seen, or just the person who's talking?
Right now, it's all four of us.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure because there was some. Doesn't matter. It's all good.
So eventually, the brick just becomes too much, right? It's just too much. So you have to move to. You get a call from Joe Caroli who says, "Hey, you know what? We're opening up this space over here at the Adrian Theater called the Playground. Why don't you come on over here?"
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
He said, would you like to look at this space that is nothing but
okay.
gym and maybe make it into something? Not we're opening it. Like we all opened it together.
Yeah. And we negotiated for a long time with the owner.
That.
Joe Caroli worked with us on that. It must have been 8 months that we negotiated.
Yes.
That's Joe Caroli with the mic. And then the umpire you saw, I forget his name, but he's a famous umpire. So that was our grand opening. We had a mummers band. We had a local broadcaster. There's Mike.
Eric Gregg is the umpire.
Eric Gregg.
Oh, yeah.
And
there's John Saccone in the back.
And then there's the Adonis. The Adonis Theater is right next to us. So
yes.
Guys that would sneak into there, it was pretty humiliating to see a mummers band a referee and all this hoopla right next door.
Yeah.
And that's the
Awesome.
space.
So the playground also used to have tables as well, correct?
Oh gosh, right. And they had what was the food situation? I can't remember. Did they?
There was no food situation. I
There
don't
was no food. Okay.
know. Oh shoot! I was going to say something. Forget it.
So okay, so now you're running in this space, and did the audience follow you over here? Did that energy move with you to the playground?
Yeah, I know what I was going to say. The thing about the brick was that there were many things about it that just weren't working. One was that we always had to perform so late at night. And the other one was it was on South Street, and South Street was just mobbed with people, and people could never find parking. People were coming to our show late consistently.
Oh, right.
Could not park their cars, and they could not get to our show. And then people didn't really like being on South Street, and we were saying we were a family-friendly show, but it was sort of, not a great family-friendly place to be. So there were a lot of reasons to move. And Jim's right. He worked probably the hard because there was so many contracts and things to make the playground something viable, something that would really work for us long term. Because, like you said, we were vagabonds. We're just like moving from place to place, and we didn't want to do that anymore. We were getting tired of that.
And at this point, did you have the playground all to yourselves, or were you sharing it?
We were asked to be the anchor, right? So it was already a deal where they wouldn't give it to anybody else. We had Saturday nights.
They would book other stuff.
Right. They booked other stuff, but it turned out not to be a great situation because theater companies
need Saturday nights.
Right. They don't want to book unless you have a Saturday night.
They did that for a long time. We did that with them till at least 2013, 2014 that we were kind of sharing that space. And it was around that time that we took it over full time.
I don't know if people saw in the photo, it was configured totally differently.
Right.
I don't know if you can show that again.
Back to that photo.
Yes, it was configured lengthwise. So there's another photo. Oh, there's the bathroom. Yeah. So the stage was next to where the hallway to the bath. Thank you, Dave. Where the hallway to the bathroom is. And so we had to we reconfigured the entire thing. Who did that? Was that Dave and Joe, or who redid it?
I'm sure it was Dave.
But one thing to note was that, and if you go back to that slide, you see people walking around. We used to sell things before the show. So
vending.
Yeah, we used to do vending. So each person had something that they were trying to sell. Some of it was like I had sold bacon, and people would sell pennants. Okay, there's Michael Jeffrey Cohen, who looks Amish and is not Amish. We'd sell our pennants and things like that. One of the things we sold was you would just go up to someone and keep poking them. It's like, hey, and then they have to pay you to make it stop, So there was a lot of good stuff.
The idea was from Dick Chudnow wanting the whole thing to feel like a real sporting event, and to have vendors at a fort and selling pennants and hot dogs, and then it would slowly get more and more bizarre. We would come up with vending ideas all week long. Like we couldn't wait.
Oh, yeah.
Vending item. We loved vending. I am still a fan of vending. You say, how has the show changed, Don Montrey? I want vending back. Take me out to see improv back. That's how the show has changed.
If you could have one, which one would it be?
Ooh.
Can I just note, I was sweating and the show hadn't started. That's disgusting.
Because it's easy, and vending adds too much time to the show. And we all know comedy got to be concise.
Right, exactly.
Strangled. Comedy's got to be strangled.
Right, that's what I meant.
So it is at some point, like we kind of talked about earlier, at some point the four of you come to a decision that your time as owners, well, you remained owners, but your time as management has come to an end. Can you tell us about that decision, and then what was it like handing that over? This is you celebrating not being management anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fancy dinner.
Now that's when we won a Barrymore. We won a Barrymore, I guess.
That was when you wanted a Barrymore. Yes, we'll get to that in 1 second. But
sorry.
Talk about the decision, and then what it was like after the fact that you didn't have kind of the reins anymore.
Well, for me anyway, it was a day-to-day, week-to-week job. I was the treasurer, so I was in charge of like paying all the bills, collecting all the ticket money, making sure that we had cash. Doing all the ticket-related, money stuff. I didn't manage the online ticketing once we finally had that. Back in the day, we had those like tickets you would get at the fair, where the person they were two together, and the person would keep one and we would keep one. It was a really high thing, but it was for me. You don't want to kind of give up your baby, but it was another more than part-time job, just doing that piece for me. So I was partly relieved,
Oh, I believe it. Jim, Bobby?
I guess, I think I had 2 kids by that point. So I was not as heavily involved as Kevin was in daily stuff. So it was more legal stuff or other stuff. But I thought I agreed that it made sense to bring somebody in that didn't have kids, no, just somebody that brought in to take it over, that we've been doing it for long enough. And we had talented people and smart people that could do it.
Right. And just so people know, like we didn't just run it all, just the 4 of us. I mean, it takes a ton of, John, of course, you and others on this call know, it takes a ton of people to run this company, right? So it wasn't like, 4 people that ran the entire thing suddenly were gone and like new people were coming in. Like it was a management shift, but I like to think like any good company, there's a whole core of people that were all working together to keep this thing going, right? Even as we were transitioning out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We would have, now it's called the leadership, which is the right title for it. We called ourselves the board. That started with the incorporation. Anyway, we would have board meetings, which was really the 4 of us, plus a player representative, plus any extra person who might be doing extra work for us. We would have those meetings in hotel lobbies.
Oh gosh, what?
Had nowhere else to meet. Right? This was before the playground, but even with the playground, we didn't have the playground anytime we wanted it. If we wanted the playground on a random night, we couldn't get it. So we would have to meet wherever we could find, and often hotel lobbies were the place. And, we never saw each other consistently enough. Everything at that time, it started, email. Obviously we were on email. So everything was being done on email. The whole thing was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just think it was a lot. Like Kevin said, it was a full-time job. Like, Don, it was a full-time job, and it wasn't our full-time job. None of us, we all had other jobs. And at that point, making sure people who know the chronology of ComedySportz and know different things about ComedySportz history, Mike and I had gotten divorced by then, and he had met Dana. So they were married, and we were all still working together, trying to keep things going, but everything was changing for everybody. Everybody's lives were changing. We weren't the 20 and 30 something or 20, early 30 something kids with all that energy anymore. And it was just the right time. We'd done it for 15 years. as a side job. And it was just time to hand it over. And like Kevin said, to all the people who were working with us and had come to all those board meetings and did know what was going on and had more energy to just get us back, get us running again.
So I would like to kind of just ask the chat now if they have any specific questions. We do have some questions there. You can either put a question in the chat or put it in the Q&A box that's down there. I know one of the questions I saw is, what would you, having the experience that you have, what would you, let's see, would Dee ask this question. If you go back and give yourself advice about performing or starting the business, what would it be?
Wow, that's a great question.
Like performing wise, I know early on, I would tell myself to listen more and allow there to be silence and not to yell in every scene. So I think, and not to try to plan or domineer other players, but see them as partners, and build off their offers and really listen. Because people like screaming sometimes and falling down, and I did a lot of high level improv that way. My pants fall down or whatever, that's funny stuff, but you actually want to listen and build a scene.
Thanks, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Kev, Bobby?
Get out of my own head and just have fun. Ironically enough.
Is that for performing or for the business?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very great. Bob, what about you?
I don't know about, I feel like we did the very best we could with what we had.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know that. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm sure there are lots of little decisions we could have made that were different, that could have been different and better. But I think we, like I said at the very beginning, Jim, Mike, Kevin, and I each brought something to the table. And I think we worked well as a group of 4 people trying to run the business. The only advice I would give myself is, hey, this is going to really take over a lot more time than you think it is. Mm-hmm. So just a little warning. It wouldn't have done anything. I'd have been like, whatever.
Right.
But maybe a little warning that was going to happen.
Dave Jadico asked, what happened at the 2006 Barrymores?
What happened?
I think that's when you all
melee.
So we received an honorary Barrymore, which was the big theater awards that were given in Philadelphia. So they usually go to larger companies or experienced companies, but we were given an honorary one, which was great. And that was a picture of us in tuxedos and Bobby all decked out. And I believe the awarding of it was, I don't know if it was Scott Greer got up and said, Dave Jadico got up and said, I'm Tony Randall, and Megan Belwire said, and I'm Ernest Borgnine. So that's where it started from. And it was great. It was, to be recognized by theater companies, when you're doing stuff that's not written, but for it to be seen, and it's become more and more the case in Philadelphia and elsewhere, but in Philadelphia through Bobby's work and my wife Mary's work and Kelly Jennings and a lot of people, Kristen Finger, that you can see that improv is a critical part of theater, whether you're doing scripted work or not, that it's a respected art form, and it's really grown into that rather than just being some niche thing of playing games.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks. That was great, Jim. So the Barrymore was definitely a big deal for us. And what it was for training comic actors in Philadelphia. Right? It was an honorary award, and the way awarding us, because they didn't know how to give an award to an unscripted company, but they wanted to include us. They said so many great actors, especially comic actors, had gone through ComedySportz, and that's why we were getting the award. And it was right after Mike passed away, so it was even more special then. And then what Jim is referring to was actually a sketch that we did at the very first Barrymore Awards, which was probably
Yeah.
years earlier than that, where they asked us, they're like, hey, there's this new cool improv group and they're funny. Maybe they'll do a little sketch in our Barrymore Awards show. I'm like, but we don't do sketch. But, and then we did a
You
sketch
learned.
for them. They loved us, and it was really cool to be involved in the theater community. And now, as Jim is saying, the theater community is really embracing the improv community, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have another question here. Jill asked, do you have any moments on stage with each other that stand out as a favorite?
Oh, I'm like, so there's so many crazy memories. And so many,
Jim makes me laugh.
what?
Just thinking about Jim making an entrance onto the stage makes me laugh.
Oh, lollipop on the belly.
Yes.
Yeah.
How can I forget that?
Please explain for those who don't know.
Jim.
Well, I think it was for an anniversary show, and Mike wanted to do, wasn't it the fashion show? So it was Right Said Fred with I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
And so what he wanted to show off the new T-shirts that he had designed, which were gorgeous, of course. So every once in a while in the show, that song would start up, I'm too sexy for my shirt, and somebody would walk across with it. And then his idea was the last time it happens that he had this vision of Jim wearing a diaper and walking across stage. Which, it's good to know that that's how I was thought of in the group. But so, yeah, the last part I would come out. But the additional thing is somebody had given me a lollipop, so I just licked that and stuck it to my belly as we went through. And my German grandmother was in the audience, and she only spoke German, so she was very concerned about, my future and career and that sort of thing. But it's memorable.
A memorable, a bad memorable one, and that is when we went to DC. When we first, like the first year, DC invited us down to play with them. Because that, for those who don't know, you can play in different cities. We're all doing ComedySportz, so you can play in different cities. And we were so green. We were not great at improv. And there used to be a foul. We have the brown bag foul and we have the Groner foul. And there used to be something called the waffling foul. And the waffling foul was called if you were hesitating or stalling or just not being funny. And you would get the whistle blown at you and you'd have 5 seconds to move the scene forward or be what they call waffled off the stage, off the field. And I don't know if you guys remember this at all. We played a game of moving bodies where one person is still and the other person moves them. And we were moving the bodies and we were falling down on top of each other and trying to do all this ridiculous physical comedy. And we were so bad that the DC fans booed us and insisted on a waffling foul. I've never seen the waffling foul called except for that one time. We were shoved off the stage.
Good times.
Good times, yeah. But just really quick and anybody who's on here right now that is in ComedySportz or has been in ComedySportz, talking about favorite memories, the one thing that I will carry with me is from rehearsals. That is the one place I think I have never laughed harder. I always laugh so hard in rehearsal, just always.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, Kev?
I don't know. Maybe it's because, well, it's a different energy. Mike and I used to have this conversation about why did we do ComedySportz and what was your vision of what it was, not in terms of the business. And for me, it was always I always said, hey, person on the street, we're doing this really cool and fun thing. Come on and sit down and be a part of it. So the show was always like that, but in rehearsal, it's just like all the members of the secret club, and I don't know if it's more freeing or what, but some of the funniest things that I've seen and won't remember because it's gone like that have happened in rehearsal.
Yeah, that's true.
That is
And
true.
you're with your friends, so you just laugh. You know.
Yeah, it's improv for your friends, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it's kind of intentional as instead of unintentional, where you're doing it and no one shows up, so you're just doing it for each other. It's you're just coming together, and there is kind of almost this secret language that's not even spoken. It's just there, right? And I've also found it can be one of the most stressful times to do improv because you are trying to make your peers laugh, and they're some of your hardest audience.
Yeah.
Which is,
right?
yeah, but the whole idea of rehearsal is to be able to fail too. So that idea of trying to make other people laugh can interfere with what you're trying to actually do. But I agree with you. I mean, there can be that feeling or pressure, but certainly we don't want to have that.
Yeah.
I do remember back then saying out loud to Mike, "Oh my God, we're so lucky. We're so lucky. We're so lucky." So many of our friends were working on these careers, like these tough careers. And we were working on careers too, but we had this playground where we could really remain children. We were like children. We were allowed to be a child once a week or twice a week. And I felt really lucky, like we extended our childhood decades.
Yeah. I'm going to break up while I say this, but I remember after we took in like a new cast, and Mike said, "These people don't know yet how much we've just changed their lives."
Yeah, it's his legacy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's, when I was preparing for this, I was looking at the casts. On our website, we have every year that we had auditions and the list and the cast of people who were in there. And ComedySportz has changed the lives of 144 people in Philadelphia. And that's just the players. There are people on the chat right now who are saying that I loved coming to see your shows. I've been to 1 million shows. I love it. I remember that. There's a woman named Chris Engdahl who came to see ComedySportz on the first date with the man she eventually married. And she and her husband come every anniversary to watch ComedySportz.
That's awesome.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And so, I'm going to wrap it up. I think, Kev, you had such a great, there's Chris right there with someone named Steve. Yeah. Yeah. And Mike in the background.
Roney.
Steve Roney. So I just want to say, thank you. First of all, thank you for agreeing to do this and being here with us. It's so great. We rarely get to see the three of you together. When I joined the company, I would see the four of you a lot more than I do now. So it's really wonderful to kind of just spend the past hour and a half with you. But also just thank you for deciding to pick up the mantle after it had fallen, was sitting in Rittenhouse Square on the grass, and deciding to give this ComedySportz thing another try, because you changed my life, you changed my wife's life, you changed the life of 142 other people. And so on behalf of all of them, I want to say thank you very much for doing that, and thank you for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome. So everybody, thank you all very, very much for coming out here tonight and spending time with us. We went a little longer than we thought, but it was such a great conversation that it was worth going long. I could talk to these three for another hour, and I'm sure a lot of you would love to hear about their stories and their trials and their tribulations as well. So let us know what you thought. Let us know if you want to see more. Maybe we can get these guys together again to talk about some other things. But thank you all very much. Everybody, please stay safe, stay home, wash your hands, and everyone wave goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you all. And we're gone.